So here we are, starting with a lighthouse model that I found in a charity shop. It's fairly loosely painted and apparently is based on a lighthouse in Michigan from 1895. So it's the right time frame for the sort of lighthouse I'm seeking to make. Step one, though, is get rid of this bit. Okay, so that's the top successfully off. While I was doing this, I noticed that I have to be careful with the railings. It's all quite soft metal, and this is very, very soft here. But you know, it's also free weathering if it gets a little bit dinged up here and there. Now, for the new light. It's going to be something like that. The base is now glued in place, and the light just fixes on like so. And let's see. Yeah. Next step will be to make some covers that can go on here in the daylight. I took a template of the solar panel sensor on top of the lighthouse and used that to create a foam block that would allow me to carve out the shape of the missing roof. Using a very sharp blade, I allowed the rest of the roof to guide the angle of my cuts, and I was really pleased with the final effect. Some sanding and a bit of refining of the shape was all that was necessary, along with dinging up the rest of the roof just to add some thematic weathering. I actually redid this panel after I painted it, and I'm so glad I did, because the final effect, continuing the lines of the roof over those solar panels, light sensors, is well worth it. It means I can turn the light on and off, even when it's daylight. Fantastic. At this point, I am starting to put together some steps to go inside the lighthouse, but I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to go about it. So I start making a series of straight steps, but this very quickly morphs into a much more awkward version of that, because obviously this is on a curve. It's inside the curvature of the lighthouse, so I have to very carefully, using various implements, place the steps. But the high-tack glue that I found was simply amazing. Even so, I did have to lean the lighthouse at an angle so the glue would dry against the wall there. And while that was happening, I began work on a floor, drawing a couple of circles, one inside the other, and then choosing a segment of that donut that I created to be the space that the staircase would rise up through. And it came together quite well, although I kind of regret what happened next. I went to Hobbycraft and picked up some popsicle and matchsticks to craft some tiny furniture for the living quarters of the lighthouse. A table, bench and chair, along with a arcane book of research with the elder sign upon it out of foam, and a little coffee cup and candle made out of hammer beads. Now, to be clear, I don't regret building this furniture, but I do regret installing the floor and the living quarters so early on, because once I'd added this detail, I knew I wanted to add more detail inside the lighthouse. For example, a copy of this old sea map from the 2018 computer game Call of Cthulhu. This was one of several additional details and Easter eggs I included in this diorama, and it took a lot of finesse with tweezers and double-sided tape to make it happen. So next time I might not rush to glue the floor in place. This is a second poster that I included in the living quarters. It's actually by the artist Fatang on DeviantArt. Unfortunately, though, he seems to have dropped off the radar. No one can contact him, and it was uploaded in 2013. So I'm crediting him here, and I've printed it out in miniature because it's a magnificent version of Lovecraft's Massachusetts coastline. So all credit to the artist, and I love it. Magnificent. Next, it was time to turn the tea light holder in the base of the lighthouse into a well. And with the leftover air drying clay that I had, I made a tiny bucket. I very much enjoyed extending the well down into the depths of the rock upon which the lighthouse sits, using forced perspective, little dots of stones getting smaller and smaller the deeper into the well they went. Next, it was time to create something coming out of the well. The first instance of drama in this diorama. I started with some air drying clay and gave it a bit of an armature wire because it was going to be reaching out of the well and I wanted it to have some internal strength. Bit by bit, I refined the shape from a sort of lumpy sausage into something more like an amphibious arm. And then using milliput, I sculpted some details for this appendage. I wanted a strangely flat, slightly sort of webbed hand, and I gave it some fins or spines on the forearm. I love this UV activated resin. It's so convenient and effective. And here we can see I'm using a dental mirror just to get the UV light in at the base of the curious arm emerging from the well. Next, I turned my attention to the exterior of the lighthouse once more, and I realised that I needed to continue this line around the base of the lighthouse, effectively making the top of the access door, where you could previously put a candle inside, part of the actual architecture of the lighthouse. This would also help with defining where I was going to paint the red or magenta stripes later. Milliput really is a wonderful modelling tool. It can create fairly seamless connections between different parts of your model and can be sanded and rounded. And here I connected the base of the lighthouse to the light fixture and asked on Instagram and on the Discord, what colour scheme should I go for? Right with red or left with white? And resoundingly, almost everyone suggested right red, and I have to say I did agree, but it was fun. It was really nice to get some outside input on this model. I parted out a simple pine trinket box from Hobbycraft, I think for decoupage is its intention, in order to get these tiny little hinges for the roof. The next day I was off to a craft fair in Whitley Bay. Welcome once again to Whitley Bay Alternative Craft Market. Everyone is welcome. As ever, there's a fantastic selection and array of the spooky, weird, creepy and cool to be found at this craft market. Today, in addition to prints and pin badges, I've brought the Lighthouse along to do some crafting while at the event. Now, while at the craft fair, one of the stall holders nearby asked, how do the lighthouse keepers get to the light? And at one point I was going to put a little ladder on the outside of the lighthouse, but that's too dangerous, especially in stormy weather. So I resolved when I got home to take the light apart, which by no means was something that I wanted to do. I was a bit concerned it might not go back together again, because it's, it's not the most expensive plastic in the world. But I'm so glad I did this. I installed a trapdoor and hinted at a metal grate on the floor, and also added an Easter egg for the 2019 movie The Lighthouse, starring Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, where they go insane in their lighthouse, probably in part because they're mixing honey and terps and drinking it. So I figured honey and terps in the light, where Willem Dafoe has strange experiences, would be entirely appropriate. The next morning, as I was approaching the end of this build and preparing to go to the Innsmouth Literary Festival in Bedford, which is actually what I was building this for, I had a remarkable idea. I woke up thinking about Fresnel lenses, the lenses that you find in lighthouses that are designed to be relatively flat and lightweight, and precisely the same kind of lens that are used on reading aids. You can find these credit card sized plastic lenses effectively, and cutting it to the same diameter as the light fixture on my lighthouse, I could mimic actual lighthouse technology with a Fresnel lens in miniature. And I was so pleased with how this turned out. It magnified and focused what's quite a small LED tremendously well. So we're in the home stretch now, and I turned my attention to the base of the lighthouse, where the old classic terrain trick of putting down some glue and sprinkling on some fine textured soil, sand, moss, etc. paid dividends. I always loved this technique, and particularly with the tacky glue that I got for this project, it worked a treat. At the base of the lighthouse, I wanted an invocation of Dagon to have been daubed on the wall, unbeknownst to our lighthouse keepers. And not only did this turn out rather well, I actually used one of the tiny paintbrushes that had got a bit gummed up with glue and converted it to be a full-size paintbrush for our lighthouse scale. Someone has vandalized a lighthouse, and drama is afoot. In one final moment of madness before working on the lighthouse keepers, I decided to install a heating system. It had been bothering me right from the beginning that they had no means of keeping warm. And I should be clear that the living quarters only became such a focus for detail because I realised that you were effectively being invited to look through into the window once the floor had been installed. So the furniture, the posters, and now a stove had to go in there, and it was fiddly as anything. Now finally, I did source some excellent 3D models of lighthouse keepers to print on a friend's 3D printer, but they're 1:16 scale, whereas the lighthouse is approximately 1:60, 1:64 scale. And that's a factor of 4, shrinking these models down to a quarter of their original size, and unfortunately the prints were not usable. I had 48 hours to go until the Innsmouth Literary Festival, and I figured I'd go digging in my Warhammer drawer. And there, in an unopened box of heavy metal Necromunda gang members, 2 Delac figures stood out as being candidates for running a lighthouse. It was gone midnight, so there's no footage, but once again, Milliput came to the rescue. I was able to construct a beard and a beanie cap and a lantern and a flat cap and a pointing finger, where previously there had been bald heads, tech gear and guns. I'm actually really pleased with how this worked out, and the scale is just about perfect for the lighthouse. Finally, I decided on the location of our lighthouse, Jersey Reef in Arkham Bay, just off Massachusetts, in 1927, a truly fateful year. Thanks for watching my first build video. Please do consider subscribing if you've enjoyed this. What would you like to see me build next? I do have some ideas in the pipeline, but suggestions are always welcome. Anyway, now for the reveal. Something has been summoned at Jersey Reef. Something that ought not be disturbed round the point at Innsmouth. The lighthouse keepers of Jersey Reef are accustomed to all manner of queer sights, and some say that these have driven them to the edge of madness already. Who knows what they imbibe on a dark and stormy night, but it ain't the drink that disturbs them. They are amazed, transfixed by mysterious dark shapes in the stormy waters of Arkham Bay, where no man nor beast ought be. Though the upstanding denizens of Arkham will likely claim otherwise, these men are far from unusual in their more than passing interest in the arcane and mysterious rituals said to be practiced just along the coast. Little do these men know, though, of the events of this evening in Innsmouth, of the stirring up of the deep ones in their midst, and little do they know of the nature of that which is emerging from the well beneath their feet. Well, I had a great time making this diorama, and I'm particularly pleased with how the roof came out. Being able to turn the light on in the daytime and yet still charge the battery for the light was really important for this build, and I think it's quite an elegant and pleasing solution. There's also one final Easter egg built into the lighthouse. While building this diorama, I noticed that you could peek down through the base of the light, almost like a telescope. And so I could not resist but turn it into a viewing experience, peering through the eye of Dagon on the unsuspecting living quarters of Jersey Reef Lighthouse. Thanks for watching, and take care.